I looked down, the river was racing below our living room window. That's when I really went into a panic.
Oh my God.
Within a couple of hours, it went from nothing to 4 feet of water.
This storm system was stalled right over us. When was it going to end?
We're in front of a dam, and they were very concerned that if they didn't release the water, it was going to break.
I'm up on the roof, all of a sudden down the main street comes this big, dirty, 12 feet up truck. It looked like our way out.
As temperatures rise all around the globe, natural disasters are becoming more violent and more frequent. Extreme weather survivors have captured the intensity and the magnitude of these events. These are the first-hand accounts of a planet going rogue. On Wednesday, June 19th, 2013, torrential rains trigger the worst flood in Alberta's history. It became known as the Flood of Floods.
There it is.
Over 100,000 people are forced out of their homes, and 5 lives are lost. The destructive power and speed of the floodwaters caught everyone by surprise, including meteorologist David Spence.
I had no idea the enormity of what was to come. Sure, we saw heavy rain coming, but the full consequences of that heavy rain, I don't think we realized at that point.
Well, there's a little bit of lightning going on close by. It's not directly over me. Oh, almost over me. Look at the snow.
Up in the Rocky Mountains, layers of snow that have accumulated over a long, hard winter are still melting.
Somewhere just south of Canmore, and it is just freaking storming out here. It's raining like crazy. All the little creeks are swelling up. You can see on the roadside there, all the little ditches are, mudding up with water. And
the runoff from the melting snow pours into Cougar Creek in Canmore, where John Marriott lives.
It was just incredible. There was all of a sudden water in there, a couple feet worth of water in there. And we were quite excited, thinking, wow, never seen Cougar Creek actually flowing before. So took a couple of videos and went to bed and didn't really think anything else of it.
What John doesn't know is that southern Alberta is about to get slammed by a perfect storm of powerful and diverse weather systems.
June 13th, I noticed that there was a big low-pressure system in the Pacific, off the west coast. And these things develop all the time, but this one was just hanging out there, and it stayed out there for several days. And then it made a connection with the jet stream and started to move to the east. And then it hits terrain, it hits the foothills and the mountains, and that causes the air to move up. Added to that, we had something called an atmospheric river. That atmospheric river drew some moisture all the way from the Gulf of Mexico, connecting with this circulation, and it's just like the low-pressure system itself. When that moisture goes up the slope, it rises, cools, condenses, and generates even more rainfall.
Good morning, Rob Murray here. A local state of emergency has been declared in Canmore. Sorry, give me a second to catch my breath. I was right upstairs. Whew.
I got dressed really quickly, ran out the door, and got to the radio station, ran up the stairs, turned on the microphone, and breathlessly just started saying, "State of emergency, here we go."
Canmore, Alberta, located about 100 kilometers west of Calgary, sits at the edge of the Banff National Park in the Rockies. The town, elevation about 1,400 meters, is home to over 13,000 residents.
Banks of Cougar Creek are unstable. Please stay away from Cougar Creek.
Instead of the creek being 50 yards away from us, suddenly it was 10 yards away from it was almost right at our fence line. And we all of a sudden realized, holy cow, this is serious. It was a bit surreal because we're looking at the creek and we're trying to decide, how fast is it eating away at these banks? How much time do we have?
The runoff that was starting to occur in the mountains was already affecting towns in the mountains in the foothills, towns like Canmore, where Cougar Creek, which is normally a pretty dry stream bed, all of a sudden is full of water and property is getting destroyed.
I cannot believe this, man. It's insane.
And then sort of 7:38, things really started taking a turn for the worse, and it started eating away into our backyard. I put in a call to my insurance company at 8 a.m. They phoned me back at 8:01, as soon as they opened, and said, "You're actually not covered under insurance."
This is unbelievable devastation. I cannot believe it. These houses are all screwed.
I remember this moment. I walked into my living room and I looked down, and right below me, the river was racing, literally below our living room window. And I thought, I got to get out of here. I should not be standing here. That's when I think we both really went into a panic. We thought we were going to lose our house at that point. And I just turned around and walked straight out of the house.
Our planet is in turmoil, and I'm watching it with my own eye. Like, this is a 100-year flood. This stuff doesn't happen. This is just unbelievable. I cannot believe it.
It is flowing like crazy. There is some major erosion on the banks. And wow, I've never seen it flowing like this before. So again, town of Canmore has declared a state of local emergency.
The first call I made was to my wife, you have to leave. You have to go now. Pack up a bag, get the dog, the cat, our 2-year-old child at the time, and just go. It was absolutely pouring rain. Not only was Cougar Creek flowing, but pretty much any mountain creek around here were raging torrents that were carving a path of destruction through roads, highways, anything in their path.
Highway 40 in Kananaskis closed in a couple of sections, north end of Kananaskis Village, another in the south end at Fortress Junction.
Oh no, this is no good. I don't even think we can get into the town.
Toronto-based Nick Savarna and his business partner Tim Rydell are driving to Banff for work.
While we were near Canmore, we started to notice water going over the highway, torrential downpour. It was ripping down trees, bringing trees along the side, and it's actually going to wash it out.
Doesn't look too good. Oh no.
We came up to a wall of vehicles, and we were told to get off the highway because it was about to be washed out.
Apparently there's a huge slide. He doesn't know whether the slide was west of Banff, but he says we can try going up here and cutting across and taking Highway 40. But he says it might be, it might be closed too.
All the bridges are blown out. There's bulldozers in the creek beds trying to widen them so that the water has somewhere to funnel through. And there's still water literally just pumping out of these mountains like a broken faucet.
Banff and Canmore are situated near the top of the Bow River Basin. The Bow River usually runs across the slopes of the Rockies, through Calgary, and drops down, running almost all the way to Medicine Hat. But now the water flow is growing so quickly, it's spilling over its banks and is beginning to destroy the Trans-Canada Highway, the main road connecting the communities of southern Alberta.
The Trans-Canada currently closed both east and westbound at Cougar Creek. Town of Canmore has declared a state of local emergency.
Hey, how do we get back to Calgary?
At this point, you don't.
The road's closed?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, at this point, we're kind of stuck, and we got a couple of washouts at this end we're working on, trying to clear it up, so at this point, you can't.
So the only place basically we can go is back in there?
Yeah.
So at this point, we can neither go back to Calgary nor go on to Banff.
Right now we're heading towards Cougar Creek. It's still raining very hard. It doesn't appear that it's going to stop anytime soon.
This is the first natural disaster that I've experienced, and it was just really hard to feel stuck in one place. You're just under Mother Nature and under her will, and you just have to take it.
The highways are washed out. People cannot get in or out of town. And we don't know how bad this is going to get.
And that's exactly what David Spence is trying to predict.
David Spence is in our Skywatch Weather Center. David, more rain on the way, but where does it stand right now?
The heaviest rain still to come will be in the area that least needs it. So that would be the Canmore Bow Valley region. But in the news broadcast, they can tell you what's happening and what has happened. It's my job to tell you what's going to happen. And when you have a weather event like this, and you know that you've already missed a lot of the impact by forecasting a third of the rain that's going to fall, You're concentrating really hard and working really hard to get it right and make sure the information from there on in is correct, accurate, saves property and saves lives.
Before the Bow River monitoring gauges blew out, they recorded peak flow rates of about 1,000 cubic meters of water per second. Now the water is flowing into adjacent rivers, including the Highwood River.
And that river just happens to take some of its twists and turns right through the town of High River. So water wants to flow in a straight line, but if your riverbank is turning, the water's going to go over the riverbank and into the town.
This is an Alberta emergency alert. Highwood River has caused serious flooding in High River. If you are in the affected area, evacuate immediately.
Oh my God.
A mandatory evacuation is ordered. But for many High River residents, including Jonathan Reimer, his sister, and his dad, it's too late.
There is a mandatory evacuation, and we get into the truck, and at that point, the water's already half a foot up the tires.
We were driving and we heard of lots of cars stalling and people having to escape and get onto their roofs, and the water was rushing in fast.
Uh-oh.
Snowpack.
Yeah, this is getting deep. I don't want to be stranded in a vehicle.
It was just like the muddiest water you've ever seen, and it was everywhere. If you've ever seen a really, really dirty river, that's what it looked like, except it was everywhere. As far as the eye could see, water.
And downtown at the Sobeys grocery store where Jen Keys just started her shift, the situation is no better.
Everywhere you look, there's water, and it's fast. Like, it's not just slowly seeping in water. This water's coming fast. Within a couple of hours, it went from nothing to 4 feet of water. It's just coming and coming and coming, and there's just no end to it. We're watching our vehicles in the parking lot, the water get higher and higher. By that time, the water in the parking lot was at least hip level. So we kind of did what we could to barricade the front door.
But when the water starts pouring in, they know they're in trouble.
It was scary, it was surreal, it was, I don't know, so many emotions. Everybody was speechless. What do you say?
On June 20th, 2013, the flood of floods is turning large parts of southern Alberta into a disaster zone.
This is unbelievable devastation.
Overflowing rivers rush down the slopes of the Rockies, destroying critical infrastructure and thousands of homes. And for Jonathan Reimer and his family, there seems to be no way out of High River.
That's blocked off out there. Yeah, I don't think we're going anywhere.
By the time we were done driving in circles, it was another half foot up. It had risen for every minute we were out there, it had gone up another 2 or 3 centimeters.
Yeah, I think we should turn back while we still can.
As we were driving, none of us felt right to continue forward, and there were lots of other vehicles out there trying to get away, and it just didn't feel right that we would continue on, and so we turned around.
Yeah, we're stuck.
Center Avenue, right near 3rd Street Northwest, is completely taken over by the river. There's a lot of water here, and it's still coming. It's still getting higher. Okay, if you're in High River, get out.
Holy cow.
Powerless in the grips of such a deluge, the residents' only refuge is on top of their roofs.
Water's pushing 4 feet up the doorway in each side coming through. I scrambled up the stairs, and now I'm out on the roof, and here we are standing now looking over the town that's completely gone.
That is crazy.
We went upstairs. We didn't know if somebody was coming to get us or what was going on.
Good morning, the Eagle.
Oh, this is Sonia calling from High River.
Oh, hi.
Our town is in a complete panic of a state.
With such a late warning, High River residents are in shock. It seemed no one had seen this coming.
In the mountains where the Highwood River starts, that was the area of the greatest rainfall. That was the area where they had 300 millimeters of rain, and all that came down the Highwood and had nowhere to go but to flood the town.
First responders and other members of the community initiate search and rescue operations for the 13,400 residents and visitors in the town. 150 of them from rooftops.
There was people getting rescued from other businesses around and stuff, and they were rescuing them in like dump trucks and front-end loaders and whatever they could, right?
I'm up on the roof and I realize we're not getting down. There's nowhere to go. And all of a sudden, just like the cavalry coming, this big dump truck comes down the street, plowing through the water. It looked like our way out. Everyone was dirty and muddy and wet, but we know we're getting out of there.
Jeez, eh?
This wasn't in the plans this morning.
We tried to flag people down, and we actually caught the attention of a manure truck that was going down the streets as well. So they were waving at us, so we climbed down.
I'm seeing windows knocked out of buildings. It's a complete shambles. There's people sitting in their stores on their counters waiting to get out because they couldn't get out the doors. The pressure of the water was too hard to get out.
Well, there's somebody upstairs there.
I don't know where higher ground is.
All of the stores, there's water in them. The manure truck is still picking up more people. And there's brand new SUVs that you can just watch the water as it fills the interiors. And we realized this is really bad.
And then we heard helicopters. Somebody went out and we flagged the helicopter down to let them know that we were in the store. And then we started sending people to the back to go up the roof. Well, I'm in the helicopter and I'm looking out the window and I see dirty water everywhere. That's all you see. And there's no definition. I don't see vehicles. I'm not seeing roads. I don't see sidewalks. I don't see parks. I just see, everywhere I look, I just see water. And I see water rushing where water shouldn't be. That's when I think to myself, holy crap, like this is crazy. This is bad.
But it was about to get a lot worse.
People were losing their property. People were losing their homes to flooding. Some people had lost their lives by this point. When was it going to end?
When the low-pressure system that originated in the Pacific moved into northern Montana and up into southern Alberta, it was blocked by a high-pressure system to the north. Meteorologists call this phenomenon a Rex block.
It just kept dumping moisture, tons of moisture on southern Alberta. I mean, this storm system was stalled right over us. When was it going to move out? This is when I first realized the rain is not going to stop anytime soon, and that this flood is going to intensify, and then it was going to get a lot worse before it gets better. I knew, you know, this is more than a Canmore story. This is going to be a Calgary story as well, because these rivers do flow fast, and it wasn't going to take very long for the floodwaters that were in Canmore to reach Calgary.
Calgary is one of Canada's largest cities. Once nicknamed Cowtown by cattle farmers and cowpokes, Calgary exploded during the oil boom of the 1970s. Today, Calgary is a cosmopolitan city of skyscrapers and industry, with a population of over 1 million. But Cowtown still celebrates its roots every July with the massive Calgary Stampede.
Downtown is a very low-lying area. We have Mission District, the Stampede grounds, all very close to the Elbow River. Now, many of the people living in those areas had also been through earlier flooding. There was a flood in 2005. And I was hoping they weren't thinking this was going to be another 2005, because this was going to be much worse.
The flood of 2005 destroyed 40,000 homes in the city, and this was expected to be worse.
Water coming under the Bow River Bridge, rising pretty high right now.
Soon this will be all underwater. Yeah, it's insane.
On June 20th, 2013, Alberta's superflood devastated 1/4 of the province.
These houses are all screwed.
Torrential rains, melting snow, and overflowing rivers forced southern Alberta to declare a state of local emergency in 9 different localities. And as a raging river of angry floodwaters rushes towards Calgary, John Marriott in Canmore wonders if his house will survive.
We are going to stay here. We feel it's safer for us here than going downtown and being just part of the chaos down there. You know, it kind of also allowed us to keep watch on our house a bit, which we were concerned about. We kind of wanted to be there if it went. It's still raining, and I can still sort of see through the cracks between the houses that the river's still going pretty strongly, and it's right against this side, running up against all of our houses. We were able to get some news out to people, both family and friends. Person up the street ended up getting us to go up to their house, and we went up there and took some stuff out of their safe that they did not want to lose.
Back to our top story now. In major flooding across southern Alberta tonight, mandatory evacuations in some communities. David Spence standing by in our Skywatch Weather Center.
By the time we got to the 5 o'clock broadcast, we had reports coming in from all over southern Alberta. If you are in this area, you're in for a lot more rainfall. The rainfall warning's still in effect.
As the Bow River overflows, rushing high waters tear through many small communities and resort villages on its banks, including Kananaskis, Wypers Lake, and Bragg Creek, population 454. And everyone knows Calgary is next.
Bow is in a fairly steep valley. Much of the city, thankfully, is well above the level that the Bow River would ever flood. But downtown Calgary, some of the older parts of the city, very vulnerable to flooding.
Low-lying neighborhoods near the Bow and Elbow rivers are under mandatory evacuation. Doug Griffiths is in charge of emergency management.
I was thinking the most important message we're going to need to get out is that people need to comply with the request to evacuate. It's saving lives. It's the most important part in those first few hours.
As a last resort, authorities reach out to the companies overseeing the hydroelectric dams along the river.
There's 11 dams along the Bow River. And so the concept was, let's just catch more of the water as it comes flowing through. Except they are retention dams, not detention dams.
Detention dams relocate water, but retention dams hold water on a more permanent basis. Now they're filled to the brim, and engineers need to decide if they can hold the water or release it.
Here we are with a flood coming, and there's no easy decision. If you let water go, you save the dam, but the devastation could be magnitudes much worse downstream. But if you hold it and the dam breaks, you amplify it even further.
My concern at that time was, is the Ghost Lake Dam going to hold this water? Is the Ghost Lake Dam going to prevent flooding in Calgary? I didn't know, because it's not a huge dam.
The Ghost Lake Dam is the closest dam upriver from Calgary. It's a hydroelectric dam, generating about 51 megawatts of electricity a year, enough to power over 60,000 homes. The engineers shut the gates and halt the water. With the Bow River gushing at a rate of 2,300 cubic meters of water per second, the reservoir is now full, and engineers have no choice but to release some water onto the spillways.
This is an Alberta emergency alert. City of Calgary has issued an overland flood alert. This is a mandatory evacuation. Evacuate immediately.
In Calgary, Colleen Baird is not taking any chances.
They're saying it's going to happen. The water will rise and cover a good part of the island, and we need to start moving animals.
The Calgary Zoo was built on an island in the middle of the river, and its many residents include large mammals and dangerous predators.
We had tiger cubs, we had a mom, and then another male, so we had lots of tigers. So our vet team had to come down and start to anesthetize 6 tigers, and it takes time. We had, lions, we have snow leopards, and so we had to immobilize a lot of large cats on that day. We have to find crates. We have to catch animals. We need nets. We need X amount of crates for these species. We need so many crates over here. And as the day was happening, it was going so fast. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is gonna take us way longer than I thought.
As night falls over the province, Colleen is still moving her animals to safety. Just past 1 in the morning, she finally gets a chance to take a brief nap.
I'm sleeping on my cot, and the phone rang. It was our facilities director, and he said, Colleen, what does it look like out there? I get outside, and I see, for the first time, water, and a lot of water.
And while they moved as many animals off the island as they could, some are still in their enclosures.
We went to the building where the giraffe and hippos are being kept, and I noticed that the window's broken below the water. And I was like, oh my goodness, a hippo could escape here. A hippo could leave this building and come and share the same space where I am in this boat.
A massive and unrelenting rainfall has swollen the rivers and creeks of southern Alberta. Torrential runoffs from the Rocky Mountains submerged small towns along the Bow River. Now downtown Calgary is under attack. And on the morning of June 21st, Doug Griffiths surveys the damage from the air.
I have never seen so much water in my life. It was as though there were high-rises popping out of a lake. You know, I've seen flooding in small communities before, but to see an entire downtown core of a city under 10, 12 feet of water, the Saddle Dome was a third full of water. It felt apocalyptic.
Downtown is shut down, and I mean shut down. There is the Saddle Dome underwater. Apparently up to 10 rows up are underwater inside.
The Saddle Dome, home to the NHL's Calgary Flames and the 1988 Winter Olympics, suffers major damage. The floodwaters submerged the dressing rooms, the ice plant, ice resurfacing machines, and the kitchens. And everything on the Saddle Dome event level, the nerve center for games and concerts, is a total loss.
We were aghast for the first while and in shock.
At the Calgary Zoo, Colleen Baird has moved as many animals off the island as she could, but the big animals still remain locked in their enclosures.
I couldn't get into the building where the giraffe and hippos are being kept. So my colleague and I, we went to the back of the building to see if we can look into some of the windows. And just out of chance, a hippo head appeared in the window. And I had that wonderful moment where I'm like, oh, thank goodness, the hippo is alive. And then he goes underwater, and I noticed that the window's broken below the water. And I felt at that point, a hippo could escape here. A hippo could leave this building and come and share the same space where I am in this boat.
As well as being rather large, hippos are also rather aggressive, especially when defending their territory.
At that point, I didn't know where the hippo was, and my colleague and I, we had to act. This hippo needed to stay in this building. We had this container full of straw, the metal container. We were able to get it in position, open the doors, sink it, flood it, and secure it in front of that window so that a hippo could not come out that window. So he was contained and in the building. At that point, we knew that we were safe, and we knew the hippos were secure.
"26 Calgary neighborhoods are under mandatory evacuation. But a few good neighbors are staying behind and volunteering to help.
Shima, look at this. It's okay, we should just go.
Roham Palavan and his wife patrol the Rideau community.
When I saw the old lady with a walker up to her waist in water, my heart sank.
Do you need help?
Just wait.
The water was so cold for a young and healthy man. I couldn't imagine what it was like for her. And I couldn't imagine even how far she had walked, because it was in the middle of the parking lot where I picked her up. So we brought the first two people to the edge of the shore and we let them out of the truck. And then we drove back into where I saw another building.
My husband there trying to get my mom out of that building. She's 80-some years old lady there. Okay, we're Give good. her a ride back here. Sure, of course. He's right there in the yellow jacket. Okay, Just get her don't worry.
We started ferrying people out maybe at around 11:30 or 12. Before I knew it, it was 4 p.m. And we were wet and we were cold.
To make matters even worse, the water is not just coming from up above, it's also coming up from down below.
It's overflowing here into the street.
One of the major issues that we were facing was the sewer backing up, clogging streets and into homes. It became a public health issue. Every city's set up in a very similar way. The sewer water gets cleaned, it gets drained into the river, but when the river fills up because of the flood, it backs up, and then it's got nowhere to go, and you combine that with the storm water coming into the stormwater system, and it meets in the middle and creates massive pressure. And you wind up with a situation where we had actually heard of manhole covers just flipping off like dimes because the pressure was so great.
Millions of gallons of sewage.
That is raw sewage. It stinks.
Kit Kaiser experienced the full destructive power of the water when he checked on his grandparents' house.
The first part was getting into the house, just getting the door open. Everything's warped at that point, and you're trying to push in, and there's water inside the house. But then you walk inside, and everything that's not attached is moved, and the big countertop, it was flipped over and tossed on the floor. Nice layer of mud everywhere.
It's up.
The flow of water is unstoppable, and all the authorities can do is to give residents advance notice of the impending disaster.
There was no way we were going to be able to stop the water that day. Getting people to safety was the most important aspect, and it was for those that afternoon that were flooding, but also to give advance warning to the communities downriver that the flood was still coming to hit.
Look at this, it is an ocean.
It is an ocean.
It is an ocean. Dad, get off this bridge.
Yeah, hurry.
Downstream from Calgary at the bottom of the Bow River Basin, the people of Medicine Hat know they're sitting directly in the path of the oncoming flood. And many people, like Damien Voisin, prepare for the worst.
Just the community getting together. I'm sorry the video's shaky. That's my hands shaking. So I've been going steady for the last 5 hours.
So we're watching on the news this devastation that happened in High River and how Calgary's being affected by this, and they're getting hit pretty hard. So we've come to the realization it's coming here. We better get ready because, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. They have no idea how bad it's going to be.
Evacuation order, so let's get as much done to help people out as we can.
A bunch of people came. It was great. Some people were just bringing in coffee and donuts because they couldn't do the physical part, so that was their part. And other people were just helping with the filling of the sandbags. Other people were carting them to where they had to be. And we were helping one house, the other house. It didn't matter. We were just helping each other. We started sandbagging the front door, and then we'd do in the basement windows and everything else that we could figure out and kind of get it as best as we could and make sure everything was covered around the foundation.
And now we're just plugging up the drains as best we can to prevent it from backflowing into the house.
I've read and I've seen, even on the news, they're talking about it, where the biggest problem was the sewer backup and people's houses being full of, you know, not very good stuff. And that's the worst stuff to have to clean up, and does the most damage.
So we got sinks plugged. Oh, we gotta do this sink still. And we got the toilet plugged. Got a sandbag on the bottom drain.
It might not stop it completely, but it might prevent more damage than necessary.
Hopefully, this will be enough. If it's not enough, then I don't know what to say. I don't even want to think about it.
With the floodwaters speeding towards Medicine Hat, Damien can only hope his work is not in vain. A torrential rainfall over southern Alberta has triggered the worst flooding in the history of the province.
Our planet is in turmoil. Like, this is a 100-year flood. This is just unbelievable. I cannot believe it.
But there's no denying it. This flood is a dangerous killer. Under mandatory evacuation, thousands have already fled their homes. and the floodwaters continue to rise.
Holy cow.
Look at this. It is an ocean. Now get off this bridge.
Yeah, hurry.
With homes and now critical infrastructure at risk, Doug Griffiths, the Minister of Municipal Affairs in Alberta, calls for reinforcements.
We had the Army who had joined us with 2,200 troops. We had the Alberta Sheriff's Department and the RCMP coordinating for search and rescue. We had a massive amount of personnel had come together from all sorts of emergency services across the province, which made the rescue efforts very successful.
Helicopters are dispatched, including a Lockheed C-130 Hercules, to help evacuate people stranded by the floodwaters. Emergency operations are in full force when meteorologist David Spence realizes there's a break in the weather system.
At that point, we started to see the storm starting to move. So not only were we able to go on the air and give people the information they needed, we also gave them the information they wanted to hear, which was that the storm was finally going to pull out.
Well, the news from the Skywatch Weather Center is all good this morning. All the warnings have ended, not only in Alberta, but in all of Canada. There are no weather warnings.
So it was kind of a cathartic situation that we were finally able to say, hey, this thing's winding down. This thing's coming to an end.
Under sunny skies in Canmore, Nicholas Savarna and his business partner Tim Rydell are on the move. They got a tip that one side of the Trans-Canada Highway had been opened, and local police were providing escorts for a few small groups of vehicles headed towards Calgary.
Woo! Are we going home? Yep. Man, what luck! What luck! All right, here we go. Here we go. Being able to get on that highway and be escorted out of the mountains towards Calgary, we're jumping for joy. We're slapping the steering wheel. We're excited. It was just pure happiness at this point and relief.
But not everyone has somewhere to go. When the Bow River spilled its banks, several large Siksika First Nation communities an hour east of Calgary were devastated.
They had over 1,000 people that needed to be evacuated, if I recall, and 200 homes that were destroyed because they were down near the river too. And they were just as devastated as any of the other communities that we worked with.
The flood destroyed or damaged 1,000 Medicine Hat homes. But when the rising waters stopped short of expected levels, some owners caught a lucky break.
It looks like the water didn't even touch it. Looks like it was all for naught, which is better than frickin' anything I can imagine.
I mean, you feel bad for the houses that were affected, but it wasn't, you know, up to your second story or the whole floor, you know, taken out or anything like that. It was mostly basements and, you know, some people's backyards, but not just total devastation.
But no, this is awesome news. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Not everyone was so lucky. Authorities confirmed that 4 people lost their lives in the disaster. And a 33-year-old woman, Jackie Brocklebank from High River, was still missing. For 2 days, Jackie's family searched the evacuation centers in and around High River in vain. Then Jackie's mother received word that her daughter's body had been found. She'd lost her life in the floodwaters.
My understanding is that the water came and Jackie got hit by debris.
Just a few hours before she was killed, Jackie saved the life of a friend.
I think it's really important that High River remember the lives that were lost, and she was an important part of this town.
Jackie's death raised the death toll to 5. As waters slowly recede in Calgary, they tell a different story in High River. The town, named after the Highwood River that runs through it, is up to its neck in filthy, stagnant floodwater.
With the immediate disaster behind us, we had to try and hire the right team to come in and do the cleanup.
Commercial divers, bulldozers, and truckloads of gear are brought in from all over the country. including some high-capacity mobile industrial pumps.
We had worked out a strategy with the Emergency Operations Center in High River and the crews to build berms to divide up the community so that we could start to pump it out section by section, so we could at least start to free up some homes so that people would have the chance to go back and assess the damage.
High-volume pumps can suck in 45,000 liters a minute. Smaller pumps can suck 3,400 liters a minute. Combined, these pumps push out 400 million liters a day. But despite all this technology, some houses could not be saved.
There were a lot of very unhappy people. They felt devastated and they wanted to go home, but many of them, there was no home to go back to. And that was probably the most emotionally challenging time, not just for me, but for the entire team, for police officers, because we knew we were in it for a long time.
Weeks would pass before the financial costs of the Alberta floods would be known. But it would take more than time to heal the scars of those who lost more than they could bear. Two weeks after the worst flood in Alberta's history, some residents are allowed to return home. And John Reimer and his family are among the first to return to High River.
Everything is caked in layers and layers of mud. The railroad running beside the road, it had been pushed over by the force of the water and was now a fence. We head up the stairs to our house, open the door. First thing we notice is the stench. It smells like sewage and dirt and rotting meat. We had 2 fridges, one downstairs, one upstairs, and our freezer. We have to empty them out. We get to work right away. We're hauling things out. We rip out the carpet as soon as we can. And so we start tearing down. The ceiling was completely waterlogged because it had all evaporated.
The government of Alberta declared the flood of 2013 to be the worst in the history of the province.
And a lot of these people were not covered by insurance. So that perhaps was the most difficult part of the recovery, is just seeing the people who truly did suffer and knowing that it was going to be a very long time before they were able to come out of it. And I'm not sure everybody's come out of it all these years later.
It became known as the Flood of Floods. Over 100,000 people were forced from their homes. From the city of Calgary to the suburbs and the small towns across the southern reaches of the province, the floodwaters upended, damaged, or destroyed almost everything they touched. Claude Ferdin's house in the town of Exshaw was demolished. The Ferdins decided to look for a bargain among the homes the government had just bought and marked for demolition in the floodplains of High River.
There was an auction, and the opening bid was around $100 or $200 per house. So I talked with my wife, and we started to look at the idea of moving the whole house.
With a low purchase price, the Ferdins could afford to move the house to a flood-safe neighborhood and also pay for the renovations.
If we continue to build homes in floodways, if we continue to build berms that just accelerate the water downstream and cause more disaster somewhere else, all we're doing is feeding the beast. And if we feed the beast, it's just going to get bigger and the disasters will get worse.
The Ferdins moved their house 150 kilometers to high grounds in the town of Exshaw, a place they now call home.
It feels really good to have come this far, and to bring a house like this all the way from High River was something that I think sounded crazy to start with and feels crazier now that it's done. But we're really proud of where we've come and the result of what we've finished.
Calgary's Stampede Park was almost completely submerged by the floodwaters. With less than 2 weeks to go before opening day of the 101st Stampede, organizers orchestrated a massive recovery effort, and the rodeo, exhibition, and festival opened on time. Proof to all that Cowtown had come roaring back.
We call this a 1 in 100 year flood because a flood like this theoretically happens once every 100 years, a generational event. Chances are, people who went through the flood are never going to see something like that in their lives. But there are no guarantees. Those are just odds. And odds can be beaten. And this is the kind of odds you don't want to beat.
When millions of cubic meters of water engulf inhabited regions and the surrounding countryside, man is confronted by one of the world's worst natural disasters, floods. Over the past 20 years, they have caused more than 150,000 deaths globally.
Les inondations sont le risque le plus représenté à l'heure actuelle à l'échelle planétaire.
On ne peut pas stopper une onde de crue, on ne peut pas stopper une inondation, on ne peut pas arrêter la pluie de tomber. Vous ne pouvez rien faire.
But how do these destructive floods come about? Scientists are studying these meteorological phenomena that are capable of producing extremely powerful flooding and surprise populations in a flash.
On va vraiment avoir des vagues qui vont traverser tout le territoire et qui vont tout ravager sur leur passage. C'est des mini-tsunamis, si vous voulez, qui vont se dérouler sur l'ensemble du territoire.
The biggest threats are rivers and streams. If their banks overflow, the damage is spectacular. Especially those rivers that run through the biggest cities in the world. This is exactly what happened in Paris and its surrounding suburbs in 2016. Forecasters were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the event.
En fait, juin 2016, c'est une crue atypique. C'est un scénario hors cadre. On n'avait pas du tout vu venir cette hauteur d'eau à cette période de l'année.
Even more catastrophic than Paris, Asia is victim to the most devastating floods, caused by a well-known climatic phenomenon, the monsoon. Every year, monsoon season brings torrential rainfall that devastates everything in its path.
Vous avez des trompes d'eau, des cascades qui se créent en quelques heures, donc les catastrophes sont quasi inévitables.
These disasters can also come from our oceans. Scientists call this marine flooding, a danger that threatens our Atlantic coastlines despite several protective barriers. This is what happened in 2010 with Storm Cynthia, in which every weather condition seemed to combine to create one of the worst floods on the French coast.
Il y avait des grands jets d'eau, puis tout d'un coup, la baie vitrée se met à exploser. Donc on s'est dit, on est dans notre maison, mais on est dans la mer, quoi. On est vraiment fait comme des rats.
Giant floods caused by global warming threaten several regions around the world. Scientists are worried these floods could engulf entire countries around the globe. How can we predict these devastating events that affect millions of people? Whilst water is an essential natural resource for mankind, this could also become its downfall. As torrential rainfall beats down, the land becomes a huge flooded area. Every year, these remarkable images are shown all over the world. They remind us just how powerless man is against this force of nature. A natural disaster that affects almost everyone on the planet.
Aujourd'hui, le risque inondation, c'est le premier rang des catastrophes naturelles dans le monde. Et on le voit de plus en plus, puisqu'on a des territoires qui sont de plus en plus vulnérables.
Pour l'année 2017, on a à peu près 700 événements qui se sont produits pour à peu près 10 000 morts sur l'échelle du monde entier.
These deadly floods are often caused by the rapid development of large cities. Today, more than half of the world's population are living in urban zones. And to gain space, people are building more and more on land that is at risk of flooding.
L'ensemble des grands pôles d'urbanisation se sont faits majoritairement au bord de cours d'eau. C'est quelque chose qui est naturel, qui est historique.
À l'échelle planétaire, on a à peu près un peu moins de 60% des villes qui sont soumises à des risques majeurs. Et la plupart de ces villes sont soumises au risque inondation.
A risk that has affected more than 2 billion people around the world. The main countries affected are the USA, India and China. But France is no exception. 1 in 4 French people live in a flood risk area. But how can such a disaster come about? In most cases, it all begins with rain, because there are millions of litres of raindrops that flow across an area that feed rivers and streams. But under normal circumstances, the rainwater doesn't have time to join the watercourse. In fact, the heat from the earth and the vegetation cause the water to evaporate into the atmosphere. The water that stays on the ground is then absorbed into the soil and joins the groundwater. However, if there is too much rain, the earth becomes too soaked and forms an impermeable layer on the surface. This is what experts call saturated soil.
Si le sol est saturé, en fait, ses capacités d'infiltration vont être réduites. Plus un sol est saturé, plus la vitesse d'infiltration dans ce sol est faible. Et donc, on peut avoir localement des moments où l'intensité de la pluie dépasse la capacité d'infiltration dans le sol. Alors, à ce moment-là, l'eau stagne en surface et elle ne stagne pas très longtemps. S'il y a un peu de pente localement, l'eau commence à ruisseler.
The steeper the slope is, the faster the water will stream down it. The flow of water accelerates even faster when it meets urban surfaces such as roads or pavements that are sealed by asphalt.
Dès lors que l'eau ruisselle à la surface d'une zone imperméabilisée, elle va rejoindre un caniveau, elle va rejoindre une zone où elle va transiter plus rapidement. Elle va former des mini-rivières, des rivières éphémères bien sûr, qui s'arrêteront dès lors que la pluie s'arrêtera. Et puis dans ces mini-rivières éphémères, l'eau va transiter très vite.
These images of Paris demonstrate the sheer scale of the phenomenon in cases of torrential rain. Even worse, on the 3rd of October 2015, Cannes was victim to one of the most tragic rain-related events recorded in France over the past 40 years. On that day, a static storm caused heavy rains. The impermeability of the ground caused the water level to rise in the streets within minutes. Thousands of people were affected and 5 were killed.
Il y a des études qui ont été menées qui montrent que 90% des victimes qui ont eu lieu en France ces dernières années ont eu lieu en dehors des cours d'eau. On n'était pas dans la zone inondable. On était dans une zone qui était soumise justement à cet effet de ruissellement.
Unusually, this run-off water effect will also supply the closest sources of water. Normally, water runs in what we call the riverbed. However, when there is a large quantity of rain, the water course will flood and its level and flow will increase. It breaks first across what we call the riverbanks. When the rain rises above the average level, the flood then intensifies and submerges the floodplains.
On est capable aujourd'hui de déterminer à travers des atlas de zones inondables quels sont ces champs d'inondation potentiels et on se rend compte qu'effectivement on a construit énormément sur ces dernières décennies dans ces territoires.
This is exactly what happened in Germany with the Elbe and Danube River. In June 2013, the rivers had a record number of water level rises. In certain places, they reached a height 4 times bigger than their usual riverbed. These floods caused almost $7 billion worth of damage and forced 85,000 people to evacuate. A tragic situation that lasted for several weeks.
L'inondation met beaucoup de temps à se propager puisqu'on est sur des pentes qui sont très faibles et donc l'eau met beaucoup de temps pour avancer. On est aussi sur des zones très vastes où les espaces qui sont occupés par les cours d'eau sont très importants et de fait l'étalement fait qu'on a une vitesse qui est beaucoup plus lente que dans une configuration beaucoup plus étroite où là les débits sont beaucoup plus rapides.
This is particularly the case in mountainous regions, where the narrow valleys and steep slopes can, over a few hours, cause what experts call flash floods.
En fait, une crue éclair signifie vraiment d'une intensité extrêmement forte en un laps de temps très rapide. D'ailleurs, quand on regarde l'hydrogramme de crue, c'est-à-dire le graphique qui permet de montrer la montée des eaux en un espace de temps donné, on va avoir quasiment un pic. C'est-à-dire que vraiment, on a une montée immédiate et une décrue tout aussi rapide.
The source of this extreme phenomenon, storms. The humidity in the clouds provokes heavy rainfall on very localized areas. The water level rises quickly. It can reach several meters in just a few hours.
Les conséquences, c'est d'avoir des dommages très importants et notamment par l'arrachement de ce qui va se situer sur les berges, comme la végétation par exemple, qui lorsqu'elle va rencontrer un point de resserrement plus étroit, dans des gorges par exemple, ou bien lorsqu'elle va avoir à franchir un obstacle tel qu'un pont, elle peut se coincer dans ces points étroits ou sous les arches du pont et former ce qu'on appelle des embâcles. Alors les embâcles sont des barrages naturels qui ne sont bien sûr pas faits pour résister et ils peuvent bien entendu céder et de fait on va avoir un phénomène de vague qui va se propager, une onde de crue qui va se propager très rapidement.
On va vraiment avoir des vagues qui vont traverser tout le territoire et qui vont tout ravager sur leur passage. C'est des mini-tsunamis, si vous voulez, qui vont se dérouler sur l'ensemble du territoire.
These dams have accumulated a huge mass of water that will eventually hurtle down the slopes and suddenly increase the water flow. In other words, the power of the water becomes uncontrollable and can have serious consequences for mankind.
Une personne qui n'est pas très en forme, si elle tombe dans 15 cm d'eau, allant au-delà d'un mètre seconde, eh bien, elle peut ne pas arriver à se relever.
On a une réelle force d'arrachement de l'eau et une réelle puissance. Il faut savoir, par exemple, que lorsque vous avez de l'eau sur la chaussée, il suffit de 30 cm d'eau pour emporter une voiture.
Un tiers des gens qui meurent lors d'une crue exceptionnelle, en fait, sont morts noyés, emportés par leur véhicule. Là où ils se sentaient en sécurité, en fait, ils ont été mis en danger, tout simplement parce que le véhicule s'est mis à flotter.
Over the past 20 years, flooding has caused over 150,000 fatalities. During this period, we have recorded over 3,000 events that have covered the whole planet. Yet the victims are almost all concentrated on one continent.
Au total, 95% des victimes, en fin de compte, sont sur le continent asiatique. Tout simplement parce qu'on a des inondations qui sont récurrentes annuellement et donc qui sont liées à un phénomène climatique qui est très bien connu, qui est la mousson, et qui va générer les inondations les plus catastrophiques au niveau mondial.
Monsoons cause the most disastrous floods in the world because this phenomenon is one of the most powerful on the planet. It starts with the flow of a mass of air. In other words, wind that comes from a difference in temperature between the land and the sea. Between June and September, the sun tends to heat the earth more rapidly than it does the oceans. This hot air leaves the ground and rises towards the cooler and more humid winds from the ocean. In the Indian Ocean, the warming of the surface water will have a major effect on the start of the monsoon season in June. A meteorological phenomenon that is well known to climatologists.
Plus la température est élevée et l'océan Indien est très chaud, plus les vents de mousson sont gorgés de vapeur d'eau, d'humidité. Et ces vents humides se dirigent vers le continent et arrivent sur la côte ouest de l'Inde.
To turn the humidity into torrential rain, these monsoon winds must rise even further into the atmosphere. Often, an obstacle such as a mountain can create this elevation.
Donc ces flux de mousson chargés d'humidité abordent frontalement ces chaînes de relief. Donc l'air est obligé de monter. Quand il monte, il se refroidit. L'eau se condense. Vous avez formation encore plus de nuages et précipitations.
These water-filled clouds will cause considerable flooding on one of the most populated Indian megalopolises, Mumbai, and its 18 million inhabitants. Situated on the west coast of India, Mumbai is just downhill from the mountain range. At barely 1,200 meters altitude, the western Nats Mountains are still enough to create these famous monsoon clouds. And since this mountainous region is situated at a low altitude, the amount of rainfall can get out of hand.
Le 26 juillet 2005, il est tombé 1 mètre de pluie en 24 heures. Donc beaucoup plus que la quantité annuelle n'importe où en France, quoi. En 24 heures.
When experts talk about 1 meter of water, it's important to understand the quantity of water that falls on only 1 meter squared. It is like the equivalent of 5 baths. The result is devastating as these rain clouds advance across tens of kilometers squared.
C'est extrêmement impressionnant. C'est comme si vous imaginiez que vous circuliez sur une autoroute et de part et d'autre de l'autoroute, vous avez des trompes d'eau, des cascades qui se créent en quelques heures et des quantités d'eau qui dévalent les pentes, des reliefs, des tonnes d'eau en fait qui tombent.
When it comes into contact with the mountains, the condensation will also release energy, something we call dormant heat. This hotter air causes what scientists call a positive feedback loop. The clouds are feeding themselves with moisture. This is why the monsoon rain can last several months.
Ce qu'il faut comprendre, c'est qu'en fait, entre juin et septembre, il tombe 80% de la pluviométrie annuelle. Alors cette pluie, elle est nécessaire bien sûr pour l'agriculture du riz ou encore du coton, mais le problème c'est que lorsque cette mousson est trop active, ça a un effet inverse. Et là, pour le coup, on assiste à des drames humains très importants.
This is because this huge quantity of water runs down the mountainside and spreads extremely fast for miles around, invading the inhabited regions. Rapid urbanization is one of the contributing factors of flooding because it makes the ground impermeable. In cities, the water rises quickly and becomes a death trap for its inhabitants.
Le continent asiatique est particulièrement vulnérable. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il s'est développé de manière galopante durant ces 30-50 dernières années. Et donc cette urbanisation qui a été vraiment effrénée n'a pas intégré cette question du risque, pourtant récurrente et annuelle. Et le problème, c'est que dès qu'on n'intègre pas dans les questions d'urbanisme et d'aménagement du territoire ce risque, finalement on va accroître ce phénomène.
Il y a beaucoup de bidonvilles, de gens qui vivent dans des maisons de tôle. Et bien évidemment, si vous avez des lames d'eau d'1 mètre ou de 2 mètres, vous pouvez imaginer ce qui se passe dans ce type d'habitat. Donc les catastrophes sont quasi inévitables.
As well as this, trapped by the waterproof ground, the flood takes a long time to flow back. After only 48 hours, this water can't flow back and is contaminated by all sorts of waste.
On a un réel problème de salubrité publique avec les eaux stagnantes. On peut avoir la présence de cadavres animaux dans l'eau qui va engendrer le développement possible de pathologies et qui peuvent créer un risque sanitaire réel pour une population entière.
These horrendous floods affect the entire Asian continent. A little further north in China, the most populated country on Earth, this country is also hit by this extreme phenomenon. In the last 30 years, over 200 giant floods have been recorded there, as we can see from this remarkable footage. In August 2016, 3 million inhabitants of the city of Yulin were subject to a violent flash flood. Faced by the sheer power of the torrential rain, 3 people got stuck in this car that could have got carried away at any moment. Luckily, the passengers in the bus take action. They manage to extract the driver and her children in the end.
La Chine est concernée par une mousson qui vient du Pacifique Ouest et qui apporte aussi des quantités de pluie importantes. Et c'est aussi une région qui est très concernée par les cyclones, en fait, ou les typhons, ou les tempêtes tropicales, même pendant la saison de mousson.
China is on the northern limits of the monsoon. The winds there are weaker and not able to prevent cyclones from forming, unlike other Asian countries situated around the Indian Ocean. This unique situation increases the amount of rain that falls in southern China when monsoons and cyclones combine. Each year, destructive floods force hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate their homes that have been built in flood risk zones.
接到这个防水板通知，然后在1个小时之内全部拆完。现在我们走知道已经沉了一大半了。
Even after this heavy rainfall, the disasters just keep on coming. The now fragile land causes landslides. The monsoon season begins at the start of June, and in 2017 there were tragic consequences right from the first month.
Malheureusement, le bilan humain est très lourd, hein, plus de 60 morts, des dizaines de personnes disparues. Près de 50 000 maisons ont été détruites, hein, se sont effondrées pendant cette période. Près de 350 000 habitations ont été impactées, donc partiellement détruites. C'est un chiffre assez impressionnant. Des centaines de milliers de personnes ont dû être déplacées. On parle d'1 million de personnes, hein, qui ont dû se déplacer pendant cette mousson afin de survivre en quelque sorte. Et puis le bilan économique également qui est très lourd, hein, près de 5 milliards d'euros. Donc vraiment une mousson dévastatrice en Chine en juin 2017.
Ultimately, these were the most disastrous floods for China over the past decade. In 2017, no less than 20 million people in Asia were estimated to have been affected by this devastating phenomenon. Even large capital cities aren't spared from this threat. In Japan, scientists have found a solution to attack this problem. Tokyo is regularly victim to intense floods caused by torrential rainfall. A major problem for this megalopolis of 37 million inhabitants that is built on flood risk zones.
水に対しては世界一危ない都市っていう考えた方がいいと思いますね。
In order to protect itself, the Japanese capital has looked at things on a large scale. The city has an anti-flood canalization system situated around 30 kilometers uphill from the capital.
もともとそういう浸水被害は起きる地域だったんですけども、そういうところに、道路ですとか住宅が建つようになったということで、より一層その洪水によってですね、浸水被害が大きくなったんですね。それを解消するというようなことで、この場所に作られたということになります。
Christened the G-Can project, this concrete palace is one of the biggest anti-flooding sewers in the world. Installed 50 meters below the ground, at any one time it gathers and channels the equivalent of 100 Olympic swimming pools of water. Since 2006, these subterranean canals have controlled the rise in water level as well as hundreds of floods that would have created numerous victims in this highly populated region. Although France has a less extreme climate than Asia, it is still not safe from flooding. 270,000 kilometers of watercourses span across the entire country, with the risk of major flooding on 5% of the land.
En France, le risque inondation est le risque le plus important sur la France métropolitaine. On est sur 17 millions d'habitants qui sont concernés, soit 1 sur 4.
Amongst the largest rivers in France, the Seine is no exception. This river flows over 700 kilometers from the highest point in Langres all the way to Le Havre, where it exits into the English Channel. Its watershed stretches across several regions and also gathers water from a number of sources, such as the Oise, the Marne, the Aube and the Yonne. This huge stretch of land groups together nearly 30% of the French population. One of the critical points of the river is Paris and its surrounding suburbs, which concentrate a population of 12 million people. Every year the river is under high surveillance as it often bursts its banks. In January 2018, a large rise in the water level hit the capital and a major part of the Seine basin. However, the most violent flooding took place during a period when nobody expected it. June 2016. In only a few days, the river had reached its highest level in 30 years. At the time, the authorities feared a disastrous scenario, a 100-year flood.
La crue centenale, c'est une crue qui a une chance sur 100 de se produire chaque année. Ce n'est pas une crue qui revient tous les 100 ans, mais bien une probabilité statistique d'une chance sur 100 chaque année.
A 100-year flood was particularly dreaded, as it directly threatened the 2 million inhabitants of the capital city. This is what happened in 1910. At the time, the Seine reached a record level of 8 meters 62. That's 6 meters above its average level. Over the course of several weeks, it reached several districts and flooded more than 20,000 buildings. There was colossal damage. This event had a huge effect on the city, which has since been seeking a way to protect itself at all costs from another event like this.
Pour protéger Paris suite à la crue de 1910, on a entrepris des travaux de construction de grands barrages. Et ces 4 grands barrages sont situés sur chacun des grands affluents de la Seine.
These large dams supply reservoir lakes. During the winter, they store part of the water discharged by the rain. This is what we call flood control. In summer, these lakes play another beneficial role for the Seine. When the river level is at its lowest, the stored water allows it to be replenished.
Le bassin de la Seine est à la fois extrêmement plat et extrêmement poreux. Il a fallu trouver des cuvettes imperméables à proximité des cours d'eau. Et via un système de canal qui prélève de l'eau sur le cours d'eau naturel, on envoie cette eau dans la cuvette imperméable, et ce qui permet de limiter, on va dire, les niveaux d'eau sur les agglomérations qui sont situées depuis le 1er mètre en aval de ces ouvrages jusqu'à la région parisienne et même au-delà.
This is a great challenge. To reduce even just 80 centimeters of water rise in Paris, we need to fill 4 reservoir lakes that have a storage capacity of 800 million cubic meters.
800 millions de mètres cubes d'eau, ça peut paraître colossal, et pour autant, en quelques semaines de pluie, ça peut quasiment se saturer et se remplir complètement.
But what happens when the latest water level rises happen very late in the season? This is what happened in May 2016. At the time, the reservoir lakes were filled to face the low level of water during the summer. But Île-de-France was then hit by an abnormal amount of rainfall.
On est quasiment aux portes de l'été météorologique. Pour les ingénieurs de Météo France, l'été météorologique débute le 1er juin. Donc lorsque vous avez déjà un mois de mai qui affiche 3 fois plus de pluie qu'en temps normal, vous vous dites, bon, maintenant, ça y est, ça va se calmer, on arrive au mois de juin, c'est le début de l'été, la saison sèche.
En fait, les sols qui commencent en général à s'assécher au mois de mai, parce que la végétation a bien reprise, sont restés extrêmement humides et ils ont été, à la fin du mois de mai, complètement saturés.
Normally, water evaporates thanks to the vegetation that filters into the soil to join the groundwater. But when the soil is saturated, the water starts to run towards the watercourses. At the end of May 2016, the weather got dramatically worse. Within a few days, the torrential rain fell on France at an alarming rate.
Sur cette carte des cumuls des précipitations, lorsqu'on a du bleu, c'est qu'on a eu des cumuls de précipitations en général supérieurs à 150 mm pour les 5 jours. La région Île-de-France et le bassin versant de la Seine ont été parmi les plus arrosés à ce moment-là. On a mesuré des précipitations représentant entre un quart et un tiers des précipitations annuelles.
Sur plusieurs villes, sur Paris, sur Troyes, sur Orléans, on observe des précipitations qui dépassent localement les 140 à 180 mm, donc tous les records sont explosés pour ce mois de mai 2016.
Precipitation under close surveillance. In order to anticipate possible floods, the nearly 22,000 kilometres of watercourses throughout France are analysed 24 hours a day by Vigicru forecasters.
Vigicru, c'est un système qui nous permet de connaître en temps réel l'évolution des cours d'eau. On a un système d'appareillage qui nous permet d'avoir des niveaux de vigilance vert, jaune, orange, rouge en fonction de la montée des cours d'eau. Et ces éléments sont des éléments de prévision.
Surveillance that took place on a number of tributaries of the Seine, as even the slightest rise in water could cause a major disaster that would affect 20 million people. In May 2016, attention was suddenly drawn to the Loing, an otherwise ordinary river.
Le Loing, il apporte moins de 10% du débit de la Seine à Paris. Il fait 4000 km² de bassin versant et il a un débit moyen de l'ordre de 20 mètres cubes par seconde. Le débit moyen de la Seine à Paris, c'est 300 mètres cubes par seconde. Donc c'est un affluent de rive gauche, un gentil affluent tout à fait mineur.
A minor tributary that was, however, subject to unusual rainfall on the 28th of May 2016. Vigicru recorded an immediate reaction from the watercourse on this hydrogram. This graph shows the evolution of the water level of a river.
On voit ici le Loing qui a des hauteurs tout à fait habituelles, en gros quelques dizaines de centimètres. Et soudain, on voit la courbe grimper, atteindre des hauteurs tout à fait exceptionnelles, à 3,50 m. Des hauteurs qui justifient la mise en vigilance rouge du Loing à cette époque de l'année.
The red alert anticipates a major rise in water level, in other words, very large floods that pose a direct threat to the safety of the population.
Quand j'ai regardé l'hydrogramme de crue au niveau du bassin du Loing le 31 mai, j'ai commencé à voir sa réaction et à comprendre qu'effectivement, là, on n'était pas dans un cas traditionnel, on était hors cadre.
Ces 130 mm de pluie ont apporté 1 demi-milliard de mètres cubes d'eau. 1 demi-milliard, c'est beaucoup d'eau. 1 demi-milliard, c'est l'équivalent de 200 000 piscines olympiques.
There was 10 times more water than usual in the Loing, an extraordinary amount that overflowed from the river onto the floodplains. Large cities very quickly became flooded. Never before in history has a phenomenon of this scale been recorded.
On est, dans le cas du Loing, en présence d'une crue absolument extraordinaire. Sa période de retour, qui caractérise sa rareté, elle se chiffre en centaines d'années, voire en milliers d'années.
On the 1st of June, this historic flood shocked the inhabitants of Canmore. Over a metre of water was measured in the centre of the town. There was an emergency evacuation of its 4,000 inhabitants. Faced with this major crisis, nothing seemed to prevent the progression of this unprecedented flood, not even the famous reservoir lakes.
Le Loing se jette dans la Seine bien après ces lacs réservoirs. Donc ces lacs réservoirs étaient tout simplement hors jeu.
Lorsqu'on a vu ce qui se passait en amont, on s'est dit, en fait, c'est ce qui nous attend à Paris. Et je crois que c'est vraiment là où on a pris la mesure de l'importance de cette crue.
A flood doesn't submerge the region all at once. It spreads whilst following the river course like a wave from the highest to the lowest point. Scientists call this progression of water rise a flood wave. Whilst in 2016, the Loing may have been the greatest threat, the other tributaries also reached worrying levels due to heavy rain. And in this case, the main risk posed by a drainage basin is falling victim to simultaneous flood waves from various sources, a phenomenon known as concurrent flooding.
Ce qui compte, c'est à partir de quand les ondes de crue des différentes propagations des différents bassins vont finir par se croiser et devenir concomitantes. Si vous avez plusieurs bassins qui réagissent et si effectivement tout ça converge, et là on arrive sur des niveaux très très importants.
In June 2016, these concurrent floods did not take long to converge towards the Seine. It all surged into the main river just a few kilometers from Paris. In the heart of the capital, underneath the Austerlitz Bridge, the authorities measured an average level of 2 meters. The river will eventually reach critical levels. We can observe a rise in water level of 5 centimeters per hour.
Dès 3,70 m, les autorités décident de fermer la voie Georges Pompidou. Ce sont quand même des dizaines de milliers de voitures qui circulent chaque jour sur son tronçon. Puis dès 4,30 m, c'est l'arrêt de la navigation fluviale avec des impacts économiques importants. Et puis ensuite, le niveau continue d'augmenter. Et à 5,80 m, 6 m, on a déjà des infiltrations dans les stations de métro qui doivent fermer pour des raisons de sécurité.
Less than a week after the first showers over the Loing, the peak of the Seine flood is 6 meters 10. The Zouave on the Alma Bridge, a popular flood reference for Parisians, hasn't seen such a rise since 1982.
On n'avait pas du tout prévu ni vu venir cette hauteur d'eau atteinte sur le territoire à cette période de l'année. On n'imaginait pas que ces crues printanières allaient pouvoir finalement surélever le cours d'eau aussi rapidement en aussi peu de temps. Donc ça, c'est quelque chose qui était difficilement prévisible.
Although Paris avoided a major flood, the impact was much greater both further upstream and downstream from the capital. This disaster forced over 20,000 people out of their homes.
Après la crue de 1910, on a rehaussé les quais de Paris à la côte de 1910, c'est-à-dire 8,60 m, mais pas la banlieue puisqu'elle n'existait pas à l'époque.
On a une concentration démographique qui est telle en Île-de-France que il faut trouver du terrain pour bâtir. Et donc du coup, on a construit ces dernières décennies sur des zones inondables.
In 2016, the flooding of the Seine caused more than €1 billion in damage. If the river had been hit by flooding similar to the 100-year flood of 1910, we probably would have estimated a cost of €30 billion. This would have impacted 5 million people in Île-de-France alone. Areas close to watercourses aren't the only to be struck by giant floods. The majority of our planet's coastlines are also affected. Hundreds of millions of people living on the coast risk being submerged by the seas and the oceans. This is known as marine flooding.
La submersion marine, c'est lorsque les eaux de mer, les eaux salées, pénètrent à l'intérieur des terres. Donc on a un phénomène de dépassement des ouvrages de protection ou du cordon dunaire. Et on a donc un envahissement de ces eaux marines sur les littoraux.
There are 2 types of marine flooding in the world. The most well-known is called the tsunami, which are generally caused by earthquakes. It is characterized by a large wave that breaks on the coast, causing a sudden rise in water level along the entire coastline. The other type of marine flooding is due to purely meteorological reasons, such as hurricanes or violent storms. It's this second type of flooding that threatens the French Atlantic coast. In 2010, Storm Cynthia triggered floods on the Charente and Vendée coasts with devastating consequences. It was one of the worst marine floods ever experienced in mainland France. It all started on the 27th of February 2010. Meteorologists had predicted an extremely intense storm on the French Atlantic coast.
On voit une poche de vent très fort avec des rafales qui atteignent les 150 km/h qui sont sur le littoral atlantique. C'était la première fois depuis 8 ans que la procédure de vigilance est opérationnelle, que la Charente-Maritime et la Vendée étaient placées en vigilance rouge. Donc une fois tous les 8 ans, ça montre quand même la manière dont on voyait cette tempête. On pensait effectivement que c'était quelque chose de très grave.
The peak of Storm Cynthia was forecast for the 28th of February between 2 and 5 a.m. But on this night, there was another problem that alarmed the forecasters: the high tide linked to the position of the moon. It's this celestial body that bears the most influence on our ocean's tides.
La Lune met 28 jours pour faire le tour de la Terre. Et dans deux positions particulières, l'attraction qu'elle exerce est importante et ça déclenche des marées hautes de vivo, c'est-à-dire des marées pour lesquelles l'amplitude est importante. Et là, ce qui s'est passé pendant Cynthia, c'est qu'on a eu la tempête pendant la grande vivo.
On the 28th of February, we were anticipating a rise in tidal waves of 6.5 meters. This is the difference between high and low tide. But the night of the Storm Cynthia, the water level reached more than 8 meters.
Toute élévation du niveau d'eau qui est au-dessus de ce qui est prédit, ça porte un nom, ça s'appelle une surcote. Et dans le cas de Cynthia, la surcote en question était de 1,50 m au-dessus du niveau prédit.
This overvaluation is in part linked to the low pressure system of the storm that brings the water to the top and causes its level to rise by almost half a meter. The last meter is caused by the wind hitting against the surface of the water. The stronger the wind, the more it clings to the waves and causes the swell to rise. All of these conditions are therefore brought together to push the destructive waves over the sea wall and break on the land, leading to terrible flooding.
Le timing joue un rôle très important, c'est-à-dire l'heure à laquelle la tempête va passer. Là, malheureusement, la tempête Cynthia, elle est arrivée au moment de la pleine mer. Vous aviez donc cette surcote de 1,50 m et l'eau qui est rentrée dans l'intérieur des terres. Et ça, clairement, on ne peut rien y faire.
This combination of forces of nature rarely happens at the same time. In the case of Cynthia, the marine flooding spread across inhabited areas situated on very low-lying land. These regions used to be underwater at each high tide.
Pour contrôler cette marée, l'homme a construit les digues et on a fini par poldériser, c'est-à-dire qu'on a gagné du territoire sur l'océan grâce à ces digues. Et derrière les digues, ces territoires qui étaient en position basse, en plus se sont tassés. Et au final, on arrive à des territoires qui sont sous le niveau de la mer en marée haute de Vivo, naturellement.
In Charente-Maritime, in the south of La Rochelle, Aytré was one of the towns most affected by Cynthia. The disaster area is just behind these dikes on these famous polders. Anna and her family had lived here for a few years. On the night of the storm, she was still awake when there was a surge of water in her garden.
On a vu que l'eau remplissait complètement le jardin, quoi. Donc on voyait de l'eau jusqu'en haut de la baie vitrée. Donc on s'est dit, on est dans notre maison, mais on est dans la mer, quoi.
Why did the water rise so quickly? When the waves reached their maximum height, they broke above the dikes or swept across the smallest gap. This water became trapped between the protective system and the railroads, built on an embankment. The water could no longer escape back into the sea as the land level was below sea level. The inhabitants were therefore trapped in this narrow basin. And the higher the water rises, the more pressure is exerted onto the houses. The smallest opening becomes a potential danger.
Donc ça a commencé à faire des jets d'eau partout au niveau de tous les joints en fait. Donc là au niveau de la porte c'est pareil, il y avait des grands jets d'eau qui apparaissaient un peu de partout. Au niveau de la fenêtre c'était pareil, tous les joints, hein, ça pissait de partout en fait de l'eau. Et puis tout d'un coup la baie vitrée en fait se met à exploser.
Water swamped the interior of the house in mere seconds and rose rapidly to 1.8 meters. Anna and her family had to react immediately. Their only option was to escape outside.
Il faut sortir de la maison parce qu'on ne sait pas jusqu'où l'eau va rentrer, vu qu'on est dans une maison de plein pied, que tout est fermé. On est vraiment fait comme des rats. Pas d'étage, prêt au piège.
Le fait d'avoir un habitat de plein pied, et on l'a vu avec la tempête Cynthia, fait qu'on a vraiment une vulnérabilité qui est accrue et qui fait que l'enjeu humain est directement concerné. C'est-à-dire qu'il n'y a pas de possibilité aux gens de pouvoir avoir un étage refuge et donc c'est vraiment la sécurité des personnes qui est mise en danger.
Heureusement, les clés sont sur la porte et on peut ouvrir cette porte-là et on se retrouve donc dehors. Et là, faut nager, quoi. Là, vous êtes dehors dans la mer.
To get to safety, they swam in ice-cold water. And like river flooding, the water is not transparent, but muddy and full of sediment.
Ça, c'est la vase qui a été transportée par l'eau de la tempête et que les gens ont retrouvé dans leurs habitations, dans leurs jardins, etc., qui a tout recouvert. On voit que c'est un sédiment qui est extrêmement fin, hein, et s'il y a des vagues, et a fortiori s'il y a une tempête, elle va accompagner le mouvement de l'eau.
But this murky water has another disadvantage. It's salty. When marine flooding takes place, there are dramatic consequences on the soil.
L'eau salée va re-rentrer ensuite dans les nappes, dans les terres, et donc va avoir d'autres types de dommages, notamment sur le plan agricole.
On a donc un impact sur la végétation qui va être bien plus important que sur des eaux non marines, non salées.
Storm Cynthia caused a devastating number of human casualties. 47 deaths in France. Almost all of them were people trapped at home by sudden flooding.
On a gagné par rapport à l'océan lors des derniers siècles en poldérisant les côtes, mais ces côtes sont extrêmement fragiles et il suffit finalement de pas grand-chose pour que l'océan reprenne ses droits.
These marine floods threaten even more coastlines around the world under the influence of global warming. For a century, scientists have been recording an average temperature rise by 1 degree. A value that seems minimal, but does, however, have direct consequences on floods.
Depuis le début de l'ère industrielle, le niveau des océans a monté de 20 cm. D'accord ? Donc typiquement pour les zones côtières, submersibles, cette montée de 20 cm va évidemment jouer un rôle très important sur les inondations.
This rise in water level is not likely to stop anytime soon. The most pessimistic forecasts suggest a rise in temperature of 6 degrees by the end of this century.
Si le climat se réchauffe fortement, cette augmentation pourra atteindre 60, 70, 80 cm. On nous annonce même peut-être 1 mètre d'ici la fin du siècle. On aura des inondations qui seront plus importantes, avec des hauteurs d'eau plus importantes, donc des dommages plus importants. Et puis cela va contribuer à l'inondation de secteurs qui jusqu'à présent n'étaient pas inondables.
Floods that threaten the coastline of several countries around the world. In Asia, Bangladesh has become the most exposed country to global warming and its effects today. The floods that devastate this small country each year foreshadow a phenomenon on an even larger scale that could hit a number of zones just about anywhere on the planet.
Le Bangladesh est un territoire très particulier d'un point de vue géographique puisque les 2/3 de son territoire sont situés sous le niveau de 5 mètres, ce qui le rend particulièrement vulnérable aux submersions marines et notamment à la hausse du niveau de la mer.
On compte au Bangladesh environ 170 millions d'habitants sur un territoire qui représente à peu près un quart de la superficie de la France métropolitaine. Donc il faut imaginer, on a une densité de population de plus de 1200 habitants au kilomètre carré. C'est comme si vous mettiez sur le territoire américain la totalité de la population mondiale et vous n'auriez pas encore la densité actuelle de population au Bangladesh.
Living in the world's largest delta, the population have had to learn to live with the water. There are, in fact, 3 major rivers that cross Bangladesh: the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna. But that's not all. The country also has 230 other watercourses that cover around 1/10 of the land.
Le Bangladesh, à cause de ce réseau hydrographique parmi les plus dynamiques et les plus denses au monde, connaît chaque année des inondations qui peuvent recouvrir 25 à 40% de la superficie totale du territoire. Ça, c'est dans une année normale, mais le Bangladesh, dans les pires années, a connu des inondations qui pouvaient recouvrir jusqu'à 60 ou 70% du territoire.
These floods will only spread further with global warming, because the increase in temperature also causes increasingly intense spells of rain. Climatologists explain this phenomenon with evapotranspiration.
L'atmosphère, vis-à-vis de la vapeur d'eau, c'est un peu une éponge. Elle a la capacité d'absorber de la vapeur d'eau, mais jusqu'à une certaine limite. Et plus l'atmosphère est chaude, plus cette limite est élevée. Donc une atmosphère plus chaude contiendra plus de vapeur d'eau.
Lorsque vous avez à peu près 1 degré centigrade d'élévation de température, pour les températures moyennes que l'on connaît actuellement sur le globe, vous avez une augmentation de 6 à 7% de vapeur d'eau que peut contenir l'air.
En fin de compte, le fait d'augmenter l'humidité va générer des millions et des millions de mètres cubes d'eau de précipitation qui, à un moment donné, arriveront dans une zone ou dans une autre.
Toutes les eaux qui tombent sur les contreforts de l'Himalaya, in fine, va alimenter les torrents, les bassins qui vont se jeter dans ces grands fleuves et vont arriver dans le delta du Gange.
The torrential rain causes the water to rise up to 20 times more than normal in the rivers. It provokes flooding, which leaves millions of people with uninhabitable land. Due to the rise in oceans, Bangladesh is now in danger of disappearing.
On estime chaque année que c'est environ 10 000 hectares de terre qui disparaissent avec l'érosion au Bangladesh. La plupart des experts considèrent que d'ici 2050, le Bangladesh risque de perdre 17 à 20% de son territoire.
Predictions that are all the more alarming given that a population boom is expected in which the count will reach over 200 million inhabitants. The number of climatic refugees in the country could therefore reach 50 million people. A migration that wouldn't just be limited to Bangladesh, but the whole world.
D'ici 2050, on estime que c'est 200 à 250 millions de personnes qui pourraient être déplacées par les catastrophes naturelles. Au premier rang de ces catastrophes, on aura les inondations.
These large movements create a vicious circle. Migration causes cities to develop onto flood risk zones. Yet new construction threatens to add to the damage and the economic loss caused by floods. In Europe alone, we estimate that between today and 2100, the annual cost will be between 7 and 100 billion euros.
Il devient urgent, en fait, de modifier nos consciences et de faire en sorte de comprendre que l'adaptation aujourd'hui, c'est la seule solution.
Protecting ourselves against flooding is becoming necessary because, according to scientists, the climate's history is already written until 2050. But mankind can still improve the situation for 2100. Our last hope to prevent floods, one of the most devastating forces of nature on the planet.
Hostile weather is nothing new to Bangladesh. Seasonal rains and tropical storms hit its low-lying coast and flood its many waterways annually. But as temperatures rise worldwide, our weather is becoming more volatile, and nowhere is that felt harder than Bangladesh. A country being battered so fiercely by the effects of climate change that their existence is under threat right now. Bangladesh has been forced to take extreme measures to survive its battle against climate change. But will it be enough? I've traveled halfway around the world, this time to Bangladesh. I'm on the southern tip of Bola Island, where the land ends and the Bay of Bengal begins. And of course, I'm traveling in the monsoon, the heaviest part of the rainy season.
The sky has opened up, and it is coming down in buckets.
About 80% of Bangladesh's yearly rainfall occurs during monsoon season, which lasts from June to October. By the end, almost 1/3 of the country is underwater. And now, climate change is making the rains more unpredictable and intense.
Raining pretty hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's heavy.
I'm joined by translator and guide Riazul Hook.
I'm totally ready to cope with the rain.
Bangladesh receives 80 inches of rain per year, making it one of the wettest places on Earth.
Bangladesh is a country that has been shaped by water. The entire country is basically a river delta.
It's crisscrossed by 700 rivers and innumerable streams and tributaries. Meltwaters from the mountain ranges in the north flow into the lowlands below, where they reach the largest bay in the world, the Bay of Bengal. 80% of the country is low-lying, with much of the coastal region just over 3 feet above sea level. The land is made up of silt, a soft mixture of sand and sediment, making it prone to flooding and erosion.
Whoa, very difficult to walk in. This fine silt has been deposited here. Some of it local, some of it will have even come all the way from the glaciated areas of the Himalayas, thousands of miles to the north.
As a result, the land here is very fertile, but also very fragile. As climate change takes hold, more water is flowing down from the mountaintops. Riverbanks are swelling, making tides more dangerous, all of which are hitting the shores of Bangladesh hard.
We're losing a lot of the land to the water. Bangladesh is a country that might very well be disappearing right in front of our eyes.
The effects of erosion can be seen everywhere.
But you can see almost a sharp knife edge where the riverbank has just been slowly carved away. Every high tide, a little more goes out. Every storm, a little more goes out. It's eroded back right to the edge of the road.
Chacha, apnar naam ki chacha? Mohammad Akbar Ali Sana. Mohammad. His name is Mohammad Akbar Ali Sana. He has been living here for 19 years.
19 years.
When he settled here first time, his house was 20 feet from here.
That's where the house used to be?
Yeah, 20 feet that way.
And it just keeps having to move it back?
Ebong eta bhangte, yeah, it's moving back towards the road.
A large population and lack of space means thousands of people are forced to live in these exposed places. Alamgir Hussain is a climate change specialist from the UN Bangladesh Development Program.
We have 19 coastal districts, and roughly 60 million people live here. A recent study shows that, if the sea level rises by 80 centimeters, and if there is no action, then at least Bangladesh will lose around 17% of its landmass. If I only consider the coastal part of Bangladesh, then roughly around 80% of the coastal arable land will be gone.
With seas predicted to rise between 30 to 80 inches by the end of the century, it's a very real threat. Already, the sea is encroaching, and you can see how the locals are desperately trying to hold back the water.
Is they put up these wooden protection barriers along the riverbank, and it's basically a last-ditch, desperate attempt to keep what remaining land they have from falling into the river. It seems to be working for now, but I don't think it's going to hold for too many more years.
As sea levels continue to rise, protecting the coast and its communities is key to this country's survival. And nowhere is this more important than the Sundarbans region, which has the largest mangrove forest in the world. I'm heading west to see Bangladesh's best natural protection against sea level rise and storm surges. The Sundarbans covers 4,000 square miles. 60% is in Bangladesh and 40% in India. It's home to over 500 species of animals, including the endangered Bengal tiger.
All morning I've been seeing different fishermen set up with their boats in the middle of the river.
The area is rich in natural resources like fish, providing a livelihood for the 3 million people who live in the surrounding communities. We head deep into the jungle. We've taken the boat out early, 5:30 this morning, gone upstream a bit, and now we're just letting the current take us downstream very quietly. There's this strange glowing orb in the sky that I haven't seen in many, many days. The sun has actually decided to make an appearance. This vast forest provides an important natural protection to the coast of Bangladesh. Mangrove trees can grow in salt water and low oxygen soil. Their dense root system helps stabilize the coastline and reduces erosion and damage from waves and storms. But now, increased erosion throughout the region is causing unsustainable amounts of sediment and silt to enter the waterways that flow through the forest. And the protective mangrove trees are suffocating. Dr. Khan tells me why.
These creeks are like blood vessels. And the problem is because of the continuous siltation, these creeks are silted out. And once the creeks are silted, all the mangrove roots are blocked. And these are the breathing organs for mangrove plants. Roots are blocked, they cannot breathe, so they die.
200 years ago, the Sundarbans measured about 6,400 square miles. Now, it's down to a third of its original size. Of course, this loss of habitat is having a big impact on the animals that live here. The tiger population has drastically shrunk by 40% in only 10 years.
So there are actually a lot fewer tigers than was originally thought. That's not a very big population, between 100 and 200 individuals.
No, it's not a big population. If the tiger is gone, there will be too many deer, and they will graze all the seedlings. That's why there will be no regeneration. That will be a catastrophic event. That will be from the apex to the bottom.
Saving the mangrove forest and the creatures that live in it is essential because without it, a huge chunk of the Bangladesh coast will be rapidly swallowed by the sea. Hundreds of animal species won't survive, and millions of people will be displaced. But erosion and rising sea levels are not the only climate-related issue threatening Bangladesh. The monster cyclones that blow through every year bring a whole other level of destruction. Bangladesh is a country battered by fierce weather that sweeps in across the Bay of Bengal. Cyclone season lasts from August to November, bringing massive storms. But now, as climate change takes hold, they're getting more fierce and unpredictable.
Cyclones are what we would call hurricanes. The people that live here are about as vulnerable to these massive cyclones as anyone in the world. It's hard to imagine a population of people more exposed to the elements.
Cyclones are a product of heat and moisture. They form in the warm Indian Ocean just before and after monsoon season. As climate change warms the sea, cyclones and tropical storms get worse. The damage from past storms can be seen everywhere as I travel to meet those affected by the extreme weather here.
And the spot I'm visiting today is Charfesong Orphanage.
70 boys make this place their home. Shirajul Islam is the director of the orphanage.
What were the circumstances that caused the orphanage to be formed in the first place?
The orphanage is established after cyclone 1970. More than 300,000 people died in this area.
The 1970 Ebola cyclone was the deadliest tropical storm in history, with a storm surge of up to 30 feet. And since then, globally, the number of cyclones has tripled. Here in Bangladesh, hundreds of people are killed each year by storms.
Most of the students have lost their father in the Bay of Bengal.
So most of their fathers were fishermen?
Yeah, fishermen.
The country has been hit by 10 cyclones in 16 years. The last one was in 2007, when Cyclone Sadir tore through the south, devastating communities. It also coincided with some of the worst monsoon flooding the country had seen.
What would you do with the orphans, with the boys, if a cyclone was coming 2 days from now?
We have one building. Our boys can take shelter in there.
There are cyclone shelters all over the country now, and they've drastically reduced deaths from storms. In spite of the hardship they've faced, the future for these kids is optimistic.
Our boys are doing good results, so they are doing hard work. And our boys are is loving the orphanage. They can play.
So they have a good place to stay, they make friends, they get educated to better themselves, that they can now get good jobs. Every year, the seasons bring tremendous change to the landscape here. And as we move forward, those changes are going to become more and more drastic as climate change continues to creep on and have its effect here in Bangladesh.
One place where these changes are incredibly apparent is the village of Kukrimukri, where a project is underway to save homes and livelihoods from the damage caused by climate change. Here, storm surges regularly wash away houses, flood farmlands, and render crops useless because of saltwater intrusion.
When salinity improves, the agricultural production of Bangladesh significantly will impact. One other major challenge associated with salinity intrusion is right now with availability of fresh water and fresh water for drinking. Bangladesh is called a land of rivers. Water is everywhere, but right now in Bangladesh, still around 20 million people in the coastal belt is suffering from crisis of drinking water.
Alamgir takes me around the village to see what they're doing about it.
So is this the embankment here?
Yeah, this is the embankment here. It's around 14 kilometers long. The sea is on that side.
In order to protect themselves, a thick embankment made from mud has been built all around the community with the help of the UN.
So I could follow this embankment now all the way around the perimeter of the island for 14 kilometers?
All these 14 kilometers you can, yes.
Impressive.
Just 2 years back, nothing was here.
It provides a wall of protection from saltwater intrusion and storm surges 10 feet high. Ponds have been dug to collect the rainwater during the monsoon. Yeah.
So this acts as a freshwater reserve. This water can be, purified through, there are very simple techniques.
This land normally would not have been very useful, but now there are fish in the pond and there's vegetable gardens all the way ringing around.
There are 10 similar projects across the south. But for many along the coast, the flooding can't be stopped, and they're forced to flee. Thousands of displaced Bangladeshis head to Dhaka every year, and the mass influx is creating an entirely new crisis. Dhaka, the crowded capital of Bangladesh, where according to the NGO Coastal Watch, every hour another 11 Bangladeshis arrive after losing their homes to rising seas. It's a global problem. Experts predict that by 2050, 250 million people worldwide will be forced to move due to the effects of climate change. 10% will be in Bangladesh.
There are some studies going on really to find out climate-induced migration. They can't really afford to have a sustainable livelihood, so they're moving out.
The population of Dhaka is exploding. There are 14 million people crowded into 180 square miles, making it one of the most densely populated cities in the world. The city's infrastructure can't keep up. We hail a rickshaw to go and see how the people hardest hit by climate change live. With so many people in Dhaka, jobs are scarce, and many earn just $2 a day pulling rickshaws.
For the low-income people, they can pull the rickshaw and they can make some money.
Many of them live in the poor neighborhoods, like the one I'm being taken to.
This part of Dhaka is known as the Bola slum, and it's named after the island of Bola, where most of these people who live here have relocated from.
It was originally built for people left homeless by the devastating 1970 cyclone, but now it also houses people who have simply lost their land from the encroaching sea.
This place is totally a labyrinth.
It's the definition of hardship. There's only one electricity supply and very little clean running water. This is what life is like for 3 million people living in Dhaka.
It's kind of heartbreaking to see because so many families live in just such terrible, poor conditions here. A lot of these people don't have a lot of choice but to come to places like this.
Even though Dhaka isn't on the coast, it's surrounded by water and extremely vulnerable to the effects of monsoon rains. And the more that falls, the harder life becomes. I find my way to the home of the Kasham family, who fled Bola 16 years ago. Now, they live next to the city's drainage canal, which regularly overflows in the rain.
This is the wall of Dhaka water sanitary system.
Okay.
Here, there's the pumping system, end of this canal. In Khaleshesi, they have the pumping system. So this area almost go underwater every year.
Here or on the other side of the wall?
Other side, and then come inside. Water level goes up to that mark. You see the dirt?
Wow.
They were flooded, and this area was submerged around for 11 days maximum, once.
Even in here, people can't escape the ravages of climate change. If monsoon rains become as intense as predicted, Dhaka won't be a safe refuge for long. I leave, and as I head to the port of Dhaka, my journey is slowed down, not by the weather, but by celebration. Bangladesh has the 4th largest Muslim population in the world and is also the 3rd largest Hindu state. Monsoon season coincides with important festivals for both faiths.
It's the end of Ramadan here, and you can hear the prayer call in the background. This city is bustling right now.
Eid Mubarak! Eid Mubarak!
And in the Hindu neighborhood, they're celebrating the Rath Yatra festival.
It is one of the biggest festivals in the Hindu calendar.
And boy, do the Bangladeshis know how to celebrate.
These thousands of people, we've all come together, and we're pulling the chariot through the streets.
The festival is an ode to Jagannath, or Juggernaut, which means unstoppable force. Not unlike the monsoon.
It looks like the Juggernaut, the unstoppable force, is about to meet the other unstoppable force.
The monsoon.
But the revelers don't let that stop them.
tilted.
Once unhooked, the chariot temple is pulled to its final destination.
This is as far as the chariot is going to come. It's going to sit here for a week.
The Jagannath statues are carried through the crowd of devotees to the local temple.
That was a world-class, grade A, sensory overload. An honor to have been here. Just loved it. And we got some monsoon rain.
As the heavens open, it's clear to me that the Bangladeshi people are used to persevering in the face of extreme weather. With that in mind, I head north.
Resilience and adaptability are two terms that I would definitely use to describe the people that live here.
I'm discovering as the flooding here gets worse, Bangladeshis are finding increasingly more innovative ways of adapting. I've traveled to the north, to Pabna, to visit an inspirational education program.
So what do you do if you live in a remote, rural part of the country that floods regularly? You've got kids, you need to send them to school. Well, you improvise and innovate.
Here, they've come up with the idea of floating schools. In 1998, the first floating school was founded to help the children who were missing out on vital education as schools were frequently flooded. I meet the program's manager, Suprakash Paul.
শিশুদায় স্বনির্ভর সংস্থা চিন্তা করলো যদি স্কুলটাই ছাত্রদের বাড়ির দোরগোড়ায় পৌঁছাতে পারে।
They started with one boat, but now have a fleet of 39. There are 22 school boats, 10 library boats, and 7 adult education centers.
Here in the library boat, we've got all kinds of books for all different ages. We've even got a couple of computers up in the front, run by solar power, so it can be operating pretty much anywhere. It's a pretty cool setup.
70,000 kids have benefited from this project. But it's not just classrooms that are floating. Many farms have also been erected above the water.
We've got a garden with vegetables. We've got ducks that they keep here for, of course, their eggs and for meat.
Being self-sufficient is vital for survival.
In each of these ponds, there's fish that they're growing.
এভাবে পুরো পরিবারকে আমরা আমাদের প্রোগ্রামের আওতায় আনার চেষ্টা করছি এবং এখান থেকে অনেকে যারা ট্রেনিং পাচ্ছে ট্রেনিং পেয়ে অনেক।
What's clear to me is that the people of Bangladesh have a remarkable character when confronted by extreme weather.
From building schools out on the water to finding new ways to grow crops in an ever-increasing environment of unpredictability.
As our climate continues to change and the weather becomes more severe, Bangladesh is a country to watch. It's facing the most extreme repercussions of climate change, from severe flooding and erosion to mass displacement. Things we could see across the globe if immediate action is not taken to combat climate change.